welcome to the Sunday Sex Schools. And this week we're talking about fantasies. My name is Sian Johnson, and I'm a sex coach for men, and work with couples also. And thank you for joining us this morning for what is an unconventional kind of Sunday morning gathering. I'm going to invite you to introduce yourselves, please. Ali, would you be willing to start?
Hello, I'm in Corfu. I'm Alison Pilling. I'm a sexological body worker by training. I host the sex lectures, which is an event in Manchester to bring forward all the possibilities for sex that the general that we don't know about. Sex is a vast and wonderful topic, so I'm happy to be part of here today.
I'm Simon. I'm a healer specializing in deep psychological and emotional healing, and I'm very passionate about exploring fantasy myself, but also working with other people. It's one of the richest and deepest areas of being human, and it's certainly the most fun.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Ria. I'm a sexuality and intimacy mentor, conscious kink practitioner, and energy worker. And most of my work really focuses around activism and like how we can use the intimate sphere as like an act of resistance against systems of oppression and separation. I've been working in this field since I was 22, and I started a community project to support younger people to talk about sexuality. And since then, I've been working all over the UK and Europe, just doing workshops and one-on-ones and spreading the message of like healthy, juicy, sexy relationships.
Wonderful, thank you, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Sian Johnson. I'm a sex coach for men and their partners. I've been working in this field since 2016 and have a background in tantra, sexological bodywork, coaching, psychotherapy, conscious kink, and many other trauma awareness and many other disciplines. So, and it's my absolute delight to host these Sunday morning sex calls. So. Before we launch into the questions, let's look at some definitions of sexual fantasies. So the American Psychological Association definition is mental images or stories of sexual activity not constrained by such real-world issues as partner availability or setting and situation. So basically, you don't need to have everything in place to be able to enjoy your sexual fantasies in the real world. Esther Perel is a world-renowned psychotherapist and best-selling author, and she defines sexual fantasy as simply anything that enhances excitement or pleasure, whether it's the time of day, the way the breeze drifts across the field, or a story you create about the way someone looks at you. She goes on further to make a helpful distinction between sexuality and eroticism. So sexuality is instinct or biology. So I guess that would be the feelings that we have in our body. And eroticism is sexuality that is transformed by the human imagination. So that's the stuff in our heads. She suggests that we all have the imaginative resources to allow us to play and be curious, to go beyond our lived experience, with the wonder of fantasy being that it allows us to bypass reality, where we can let go of the constraints of age and physical limits and material realities, health conditions, and religious restrictions. So with this in mind, let's launch into the first question. I don't have any fantasies, so I'm always a bit freaked out when people ask me, as I think they want me to be wilder or exciting or kinky, and I feel boring. What can I do? Alison.
Okay, I think I know that feeling, because I would have been one of those people who didn't think I had fantasies, who was like when people, I don't know, wanted me to dress up as a nurse or a police officer. I didn't know why, or was, you know, criticizing the outfits at Ann Summers because I just didn't get it, you know. And I think I was a bit of like, that's weird, you know, very prissy about it all. And some things happened in my personal life where I thought I need to understand this thing about conscious kink. So I started looking into it and discovering fantasy is a way of creating the things that actually you do have, like whether it's this perfect partner, the knight in shining armor, you know, those everyday fantasies of the perfect woman, the dominatrix in leather, the whatever your idea of perfection is, this thing that you're seeking and you don't even understand how deep in our conditioning it goes. And I realized, you know, I had all those things. Okay, I might have had sometimes, like, I had fantasies about being picked up by strangers in bars, but it wasn't till training as a sexological body worker where we met this amazing book, The Erotic Mind, that actually it got me to investigate peak experience and fantasies and how useful they could be in transformation. So these days when people ask me, I go, oh, I know, how about you play out being my perfect husband for the day? Or let me control you and you do all the tidying up, you know, or I hate your other partners, I want to hit you. And so it's like, how can you bring out the worst aspects or the fantastical aspects that we keep hidden and share our secrets? And then also, you know, I love asking other people what their fantasies are, because they might not be as big or dirty, or I think a word Artemisia uses, this smuttilicious. You know, they might be just kind of small and sweet and like, you want to be powerful. Okay, let's play with that. You know, what would that mean? Or let's pretend that I was your teacher at school. And so there, you know, I think when we expand this definition of what fantasy could be from the kinky and naughty to the everyday, we can all have we don't need to think we're boring, but actually we can play out these deeply hidden things that we're shy about with people who are kind of going, oh, really? You have that one? Yeah, let's try that, you know. So I don't need to be freaked out by them.
Yeah, just adding on to that, Ali. I think it's also a really beautiful aspect of having a relationship with our sexuality is this curiosity about, like, maybe I don't know what I like, or I don't have this fully formed fantasy, but the journey is the exploration. Is like trying on different hats, or, you know, let's practice that and see what it feels like, and then I'll know maybe a bit more about whether that's a fantasy that I have or not.
And in answer to the question, the first place I'd start is asking that person, are you happy with your sex life as it is? You know, if you are, then what's the problem? I wouldn't be worrying about what other people think you should be. However, if you feel that there's more to access, then that's a wonderful place to start. When I can speak from personal experience, that I have lots of fantasies and turn-ons now that some time ago I would have never thought I could enjoy that. And that's come from learning to play with stories and the meaning that I'm giving them, and looking at, like, if there's something that I'm judging and I'm saying, like, I could never enjoy the idea of somebody being sadistic, then looking at what am I telling myself about that that's not okay. And I've been on a journey of healing my relationship to those parts of myself. It's opened so much up. So there's a whole load that you could do if you actually want to, if you want to be curious.
Yeah, I would say that from my own personal experience, that and from some of the clients that I work with, that accessing these parts of us actually is often associated with shame. We often feel a great deal with shame come up for us around the parts of us that want to play, the parts of us that want to experience new experiences, the part that is seeking novelty, the parts of us. And of course, we tend to shut that down because it doesn't feel safe to explore those. So yeah, part of the work that I'm engaged in, and some of us here are engaged in, is helping people to move through those parts, move through the fear, and find safe places to explore the things that turn them on. So I think it can be quite useful for us to have an example of what a sexual fantasy might be. So the panel are invited to either draw on their own experience or experiences of people they've worked with. So some of experiences that I've had personally have been around exploring my relationship with power. I've prior to doing a lot of this work on myself and doing all this training, I felt very disempowered in my life and wouldn't take a great deal of responsibility for my own destiny. And so I had this fantasy about handing all of my responsibilities over onto somebody else who would come along, a bit like a knight in shining armor, would come along and sort everything out for me, and I'd be able to be taken care of and ravaged and loved in a way that I'd never been loved before. And that was a huge fantasy for me. And in fact, I was in a workshop situation where we were working in pairs, and I was paired with this amazing creative woman, and we invited each other to share our sexual fantasies. And at that time, I was just in the early blossoming of a relationship. And when I really felt into, and I've explored all kinds of different kinks up until that point, and so I was really surprised when my fantasy turned out to be me walking barefoot through a woodland to a clearing where there was a four-poster bed with white curtains blowing in the wind, and the object of my affection was lying there and ready to take my hand and seduce me. And I was like, where did this romantic fantasy come from? Because I'm a realist. But when I was able to peel away the layers and access them, that was the thing for me, was I wanted to be loved and cherished and treated like some kind of medieval princess. So there you go. It's really interesting. When I kind of expected to come up with leathers and pain and impact and all this kind of stuff, I came up with this very fancy tale. Anyway, there we go. That was my experience. For clients, often fantasies range from very subtle experiences right through to what other people might consider quite extreme fantasies. But it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating to see where these different perspectives come from. Absolutely fascinating and amazing.
I've personally explored quite a lot of psychologically edgy fantasies. So what I'm sharing is actually a composite of a number of different erotic themes that I've explored, and I've been on a real journey with these themes in terms of accepting them in myself and transforming them. So it's actually the first time for me to share something like this publicly in a big group. I'm going to practice what I preach and notice the sensations in my body as I'm doing this. This fantasy involves me being cuckolded. So my wife, my partner, having sex with somebody else, and in this particular composite, it's somebody who represents a bully to me. And not only is that happening, but my partner kind of calls me over, and I'm expecting her to offer me a kiss, and actually she kind of pushes me down and uses me as a footstool to support her sexual act. There were lots of things about this that I was not at all comfortable with as I started to discover it. There's themes of objectification, humiliation, self-worth, rejection, infidelity, power dynamics, playing with social norms, sadism, masculinity, boundary crossing. It's incredibly rich. But where I've ended up is just to be able to view it as as a delicious route into pleasure and arousal in my body. So now that the meaning that I give to that fantasy is the pleasure that I can access through it.
I've had clients come to see me. They want dominating, and sometimes financial domination of someone else who wants to be treated like a dog. But the one I've always had for me is like this picking up strangers, like maybe a high class hooker fantasy, you know, sitting in a bar and being picked out across a bar, and then, you know, and I think it's about recognition of someone coming over and then this thing about, you know, I always had this real judgment about sex work, but then that the paradox of that, of me thinking of I want to hang out in posh hotels and then be seduced. So it's really this idea of fantasy and then admitting it to ourselves and seeing that I want it, I can't have it, the fear and the excitement. I feel quite nervous telling you, you know, sharing that. And I grew up a Catholic, you know, so obviously in the book, in this wonderful book, The Erotic Mind, you know, when he talks about the emotional aphrodisiacs. I swear once doing a confession to a priest, it was the hottest thing I'd ever done because it was so transgressive against, you know, and how the confession, I'm not going to tell you my penance on air, but in a room full of people, that priest was a bad priest, and it was so hot, you know. So that sense of fantasy teaching us where arousal is for us with the transgression and secrecy. What about you, Ria?
Oh, thanks everyone for sharing. It's really nice to hear your personal stories, and I know how edgy it can feel to share. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of examples, and just going back to the previous question, I think there's this same thing about like I might not know what my fantasies are. A lot of my clients who come to me for conscious kink work, which is the same as pro doming. For anyone who's not sure, we'll go into a bit of a definition on conscious kink later. But a lot of people have never encountered kink or BDSM before, and they really don't know what they want. And I think it's the really beautiful part of the journey is to like start to introduce different things that might be involved, like bondage or degradation or like being punished for something. Just to see where those fantasies might lie and sort of like having a whistle-stop tour of all the things that you might enjoy to then, you know, dive further into. One of the things that I really love to explore is like the age play thing, which I think some people consider quite edgy. But it's this idea of like having a sort of parental figure and then the baby figure. And there's a lot of ways that this can come in, but I have clients who like me to be the daddy. I'm the daddy dom, and all my clients are quite queer, so well, all very queer. So there's this beautiful like gender play that can be going on in that as well. But what I really love about this sort of parental, like very caregiving, it doesn't have to be a parental figure, it can be, you know, like a nurse or someone else who offers that sort of caring paternal energy. And it's this beautiful crossover between like naughtiness and eroticism, but also like safety and like holding, and where that line crosses, it's like how safe could you feel more safe than if you were in the arms of a parental figure, and then bringing in that sort of like that safety as a space to explore the erotic. It's quite edgy for some people, you know, but if we think about it from like a healing perspective or like a self-awareness perspective, it's like maybe you didn't get that care when you were younger, and maybe it's something that you really yearn for, and that allows you to feel safer to explore yourself. or maybe you had an experience like being hit, or being spanked, or being told off, and something along the way has gone, yeah, I really got something out of that, or that's familiar to me in some way. And being able to create a space where you can expand on that, I just find it so juicy.
Thank you, Ria. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Juicy. That's a really nice word to use when we're exploring these kinds of things. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks. So the next question is, do specific fantasies have specific meanings? Simon, would you like to start?
One of the things that's, I think, really important to understand is that our sexual personas are unique and idiosyncratic. None of us have, we've had themes that we share, but none of us have had the same experiences in life or exactly the same conditioning, etc. So I view that a bit like our gut bacteria microbiome. So two people eating exactly the same food can digest it quite differently, depending on their gut bacteria. And it's the same with sexual fantasies. The same story can potentially mean quite different things to different people. Also, I think it's useful to be aware that our sexual persona evolves over time. So even the same fantasy can mean radically different things at different points in time, particularly as we digest it more and more. As I accepted the stuff around bullying, it became possible to me to identify with being the bully and step into power and feel what that would be like, and then take even a further step back and enjoy the fantasy for the ruthlessness of sexual arousal, like just wanting to take. So there's many different layers that can be explored here. It is worth adding that there can be themes that are sometimes true. It's like BDSM fantasies might be about addressing guilt or from childhood, but that isn't necessarily true.
Right, thank you. And I'm just going to invite a definition of BDSM and conscious kink, because I'm aware that this is the kind of parlance that we're very familiar with. So, Simon, would you be willing to share what BDSM means?
Yeah, bondage, tying people up, domination, taking a power role, submission, or so giving people power, sadism, masochism, playing with pain or emotional pain.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Ria, would you be willing to give us a definition of what we mean by conscious kink when we're using this kind of language? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I think conscious kink, everybody's definition probably slightly differs, but my definition is it's that conscious kink is a way of engaging with kink, so BDSM or fetishes or fantasies, in a way that aims to integrate different parts of us. So we're using things that help us to be in that space with as much safety as possible, like communication, consent and boundaries, checking in, like maybe having some sort of wider intention for the setting, like to bring in more pleasure or to heal shame or to practice being in my power. So that there's another layer to the play, which is like we're using this to create more connection with ourselves and each other.
Great, thank you. Yeah, really great definitions. Thank you both. So back to the question of whether fantasies have specific meanings. Ali, would you be willing to speak to this?
In the book, Let's Do Something from the Erotic Mind, Jack Morin says that I think he said something like 40% of people would grow up with a fixation or fetish. And he, rather than judge it, what his idea is that it's an early childhood experience that was too hard to bear. So it was given an erotic, it's been transformed into an erotic sensation or an erotic memory that will sit with us. But that doesn't account for lots of, that might account, and we could say it's eroticized trauma, but to use the trauma word, we don't want to make it wrong, because it's such a natural thing to have fantasies and to have fixation in response to something that happened earlier that has been blocked. So like Simon said, everybody's makeup is unique, but you could say that it will be formed, like the example I gave before about a priest, someone who didn't have a Catholic upbringing, making a confession to a priest wouldn't have any, I didn't realize it would be arousing for me, but it went from 0 to 0 in the fastest, up rising of arousal I can ever remember. So in a way, there's another book by Michael Bader where he looks at where they all come from, and Simon probably can say a bit more about that. But that they are related. My secrecy fantasies. My one of my parents was having an affair for 10 years when I was a teenager, so all my stuff about pleasure comes outside relationship. So I would be going seeking, this endless seduction of people who weren't my partner. So I can, and that was exciting for me, but it was unconscious. And so I can very easily see where the seductive qualities came of avoiding commitment. So if you have fantasies, there's probably a great store of memories and stories associated that will go back further than you, that will go back. Because once I started looking into my peak experiences, I realized it wasn't just, I think I did it when I was 10 years ago, but I realized it was a lifelong habit, this seduction. I wasn't looking for sex, but I was looking for recognition and attention and to be noticed. And so all those strategies developed for that. So yeah, they will have, I think we can say, if you look back, you'll find specific reasons why you've got this fantasy and not that fixation. And that's what makes it exciting to uncover, to build our self-awareness actually of what's our motivation.
I mean, I think on one hand, it's great to think, does it have a meaning? Where does this come from in my life? And there's also just the aspect of it that's like, I enjoy this and this brings me pleasure, and I don't always have to understand where it comes from or why to engage with it in a way that's healthy and aware and, has fun and play at the center of it. Like, that is healing. That is so valid. So I think that, I think Ali and Simon have said loads on that, and also to remember that we don't always have to know. The mind is endless, so it's good to go with the body.
Great, thank you. Yeah, lovely. Next question. How can I find or create spaces to explore our fantasies safely?
Thank you. And it's a big question, because I think a lot of people do have these darker fantasies that might come in, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do with that? And I think the first aspect of it is like, do I want this to play out in real life? Like, is this something that I need to enact? Because it's going to be different when you it's going to be different out of your head from in real life. So I guess that's the first question, is like, is this something I actually need to do, or can it remain something that I keep to myself in my head, or even just talk about verbally rather than enact? So I think, with the safety aspect, it's about developing firstly the understanding of like what it means to you, but also to then have and understand the tools and the communication practices that you might need to start to bring this in. So, in Conscious Kink, which is potentially a framework within which you could explore your fantasies, like consent and communication is really central. Like, how do we ensure that both parties are really online and involved and consenting to getting involved with exploring this fantasy? And one of the things I love the most about exploring fantasies is like finding people who want to receive what we want to give, or vice versa. It's like, let's say I really want a beating. It's like finding someone who really wants to beat. And it's like, oh my gosh, great. We're both really getting to meet in a place here where we're getting our needs met. And also, like, we get to play in this space of sort of more darker, shadowy desires potentially with someone who also really wants that. So yeah, that's sort of the first point on safety. But I think if you're thinking about like where to go, because I think often it's like, how do I even begin to get into a scene where I might meet people who could even talk about this? So I think there's the aspect of like finding community. So maybe online websites like FetLife, which is a great resource for finding communities of people who like all sorts of stuff. I remember when I first went on FetLife, I was like, I didn't even know that half of these fantasies existed, and that really allowed me to open my mind. Yeah, other online spaces like Vermilion, and also like local kink scenes, like maybe attending workshops on kink or sexuality, so to understand yourself more, and so to even develop the like emotional literacy with yourself of like how to talk about and understand your own sexuality. Just quickly on the final point, also in terms of creating spaces, maybe with partners or friends, like it can be really vulnerable to share about your fantasies. Like we're sex educators and work in the field of sexuality, and even Ali and Simon and Sian even all said have had some, tenderness about sharing these things. So being like at one with that space that's quite vulnerable, and like trusting that other people are going to be able to hear you and support you in that. And also just like going really slowly with the exploration, like go so slow. Like if you've got fantasies, you don't have to rush to make it the peak fantasy right away. It's like just start trying out some of the dynamics, start sort of just sprinkling them in with consent from the other people, and just really making room for the awkwardness, or it not being perfect, or it potentially just looking so different from how you imagined it in your head, and just letting go of that perfectionism of like, it's not always going to be like the exact perfect construction that you've made in your mind, because you've created that solely yourself. So there's a real willingness there to learn and to practice and to see it as a journey.
Ideally, I believe the goal is to end up being our own safe space, so we can play and we can hold that for ourselves. But to do that is quite a journey. I think it's really helpful to get imprints from other people that have already been on that journey. So finding really conscious and non-judgmental spaces. We've all been on trainings, multiple trainings, or maybe a kink positive sexuality professional. Those are all really valuable resources.
It's finding this safe space, because being aware that this fantasy is ours, and to just suddenly spring it on a partner or someone you're having an encounter with when they might not have that same that same thing, so in a way you're creating safety by really owning this is for you and can you try it, rather than expecting that somehow by some magic and telepathy the other person will want exactly what you want and know how to do it. So learning safe words really helps, and then there are great teachers like Shawnee Love and Lex Ryder, and then going to see a pro dom if you want that, or so finding a teacher or a professional or a workshop were places that I was so I felt like kink came to get me. And I didn't, nothing in me wanted to go and explore conscious kink, because I'm not kinky, but actually understanding that I was having a little look at the erotic mind before this. We can use this for both transformation and information and inspiration. Like Ria said earlier, getting to sample things like, well, we don't know what we want. We know we want something exciting and we don't know what it is. So to be able to try things, to see what gives us arousal, and some things won't, and that's okay. But to understand that you can have, knows a funny word as a safe word, because you're going, no, you can't kidnap me, meaning carry on. But actually, when you got orange, pause, because I'm overwhelmed here, and having the safe words really matters. No, carry on. So that's called consensual non-consent. And that's there's a lot of energy in that to do the things you don't want to do, but you do. But getting clear about how you stop and how you pause and who it's for.
There was a time when I felt my urges or my desires were so strong and so pressing and so needful that I would do almost anything to get these needs met, these desires met. And I can remember speaking to, thankfully, I had some sense of something in my head. This is before I did all of this journey, but something in my head was going, no, this isn't safe. And thankfully, I was able to keep myself safe by not stepping into places with unconscious people who would just want to beat me without any regard for who I was and what I actually wanted. And there are a lot of people around about that offer this. And a lot of people come, even now still, there are some people that come from a very old model of domination and BDSM, where they basically, and I spoke to one bloke, he said, basically, the very first time we meet, you arrive at my house, I will open the door, you will undress and you will be on your knees and you will do anything that I want to do to you. You will do anything I want to do to you and just take it all. And I was like, this is years ago now. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very good. And consequently, now that I'm a wheel of consent facilitator, and now that I've done all of this healing work and this journey and all of this training, I realize that is so wrong on so many levels, because that man was never, ever going to ask me what I wanted, what I felt safe with, what my boundaries were, what my limits were. And, but I was so desperate to get my needs met that I would have stepped into that place. And thankfully I didn't. So if you are out there and you feel that your needs and your desires are almost atomic in the strength, and I know that feeling when your whole body is just like, oh, I really want this thing. Please, 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 please reach out to a professional or find a workshop, speak to Rhea or Ali or Simon or myself or Shawnee Love or Pleasure Rebels or any number of professional workshop holders, space holders, conscious kink practitioners. Speak to them first, because none of us, even if you can't afford our services, none of us want to see you stepping into a place where you will be unsafe and disrespected and possibly harmed. Yeah, please reach out to somebody who really cares about this stuff and see how you can get your needs met in a much more conscious and healthy and to some degree safe way. Yeah. Thank you. My own personal soapbox there. But yeah, consent and safety, absolutely. So next question. What is the origin of fantasies and how can we use them?
I think we touched on that before, didn't we, about where they come from? And so maybe I don't need to say that, because I think that takes Jack Morin's sexual excitement survey. You'd be able to find that online. You would be able to kind of work out in your own head. But I quite like Rhea reminding us that it just could be just going to try some new experiences and see what the fuss is all about. How can we use them? I would say transformation, self-awareness, connection, pleasure, to get stuff off your mental load. I think one of the things that sexological bodywork that pulled me into training as a sexological bodyworker was this expression of erotic and personal freedom. And for erotic and personal freedom, the infinity loop, if you're in a fixation or a fetish or a compulsion, you're only in going round a loop that could be a very pleasurable loop, don't get me wrong, and it can feel like you're getting your needs met. But in this idea of having erotic and personal freedom, what that does is give space and choice, so that we're no longer driven by a compulsion, but then it becomes a choice rather than something that's got you by the balls. You're just kind of going, I think I'll try this, or I'm going to go into this quite deeply, but I'm coming out the other side, so that when we are in erotic encounters, we can meet people in the moment, free of habit, free of our past, free of these earlier experiences that formed us. And then we can meet ourselves and others in that place of, what should we do today? Rather than expectation, telepathy, magic. And so I think that's one of the greatest gifts of going into acting out all of this stuff, to find out who we are and also who we might be. You know, it's a progression to wholeness in the end, of being able to explore without shame, transform our guilt. Jack Morin talks about the emotional aphrodisiacs of our fears giving us, you know, going into the things that frighten us to give us courage. The things that make us feel guilty are transformed into naughtiness. And if you've got anger, to transform it into passion. Because we're basically looking for to import what we haven't got and to export the gifts that we have, so that we can bring in what we feel is missing, and then help out our friends, help out our erotic friends by going, yeah, sure, I can. It's not my thing, but if you want me to hit you, great, let's begin, you know. And then there's that we're not caught up in it. We've got freedom of choice then.
So one of the key roles that fantasy fulfills is symbolically, and I think that's really important. It's symbolically creating a story that gives us psychological safety for our own inhibitive beliefs, for our natural arousal to come out. And again, mention that symbolism, going back to the question of acting out. If we can actually understand the symbolism, and I know Artemisia's would have had a great deal to say about this. She works with clients to come up with things that might look very different from what the fantasy seems, but she taps into the symbolism so that you find a much more, less edgy way to play, but to get to the real deep stuff at the same time.
Conscious kink for me has been a tool for healing parts of myself and understanding myself in much more detail. And so my childhood experiences, and I used the erotic mind as part of my sexological bodywork training and made these discoveries about myself. And so what I understood was that during childhood, when I was growing up in quite a large family, I was only seen to be of value when I was helping in some way. So that would be cleaning, or that would be emotional support for either one of my parents, or cooking, or just in some way supporting and being useful in the household. And that was made even more clear as a teenager when my mum left, and I then took over the role of housekeeper and cook, and would often do the household shopping and quite a lot of other tasks that a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old ordinarily wouldn't expect to do. And so I found pleasure in playing house, essentially. Fast forward into my adult relationships, and I realized that through using the erotic mind, that I get a great deal of satisfaction of being in service, of being needed, of being wanted, of being useful. And how that would show up in relationships was I had a need to be wanted. I wanted to be wanted. And that level of attention that I was seeking is unnatural in most relationships. And so I was completely unsatisfied. And the moment that the first bloom of the new relationship energy would end, I would start to feel unwanted. I would start to feel that I wasn't needed any longer. And so for me, a lot of my sexual fantasies were around, oh, Sian, you're just amazing and you're so useful and you're so helpful and all of this kind of stuff. And being in service to the relationship or to a specific person. And how that unfolded actually was I ended up in quite a number of abusive relationships because the person that was projecting all of my fantasies onto wasn't able to hold that or understand that. And so I was wandering around trying to be in service to all of these people and people not really understanding that or exploiting that. And so it's perfectly understandable why I didn't have very successful relationships. Now that I know that, I can enter relationships consciously. I notice when I'm giving to get, or I notice when I am stepping into being in service and they can't receive that. They can't receive my projections. And so I'm able to much more consciously navigate relationships, both intimate relationships and other kind of friendship or professional relationships. And so for me, this process has been really healing in understanding, that when I step into fantasy, when I step into an agreement with somebody, I can ask them to really want me. And that turns me on massively. And that's okay. So it's just a very sort of simple, quite almost innocent understanding of how my fantasies have ruled my entire life. But now that they're conscious, I can be in a much more successful and supportive and erotic and relational space. Sharing, always a little bit edgy for all of us professionals. Yeah, because, the work that we do is very personal to us. Often, when you go and see somebody like us, we have these skills and experience because we've been there. And we've done the trainings, but we also bring our personal experience too, which is really rich. How can Conscious Kink help us to explore our fantasies?
Yes, I mean, similarly for me, Sian, when I encountered Conscious Kink, and I mean, I was Shawnee Love's mentee for about 2 to 3 years, and I'd always been quite kinky, and it had always been something that had come into my awareness, on my mind. I had specific fantasies that I really enjoyed. I liked my fantasies involved like having my power taken from me by someone who is in the power, and there's this very like subtle change from a normal situation to something sexual. But when I engaged with Conscious Kink for the first time, I was just like, wow, there's such a world here. This is such a safe framework to explore my own self. And one of the things that I really love about Conscious Kink is this very inherent idea that it doesn't always have to be sexual. Like we've been talking here, there's so many different ways and different types of fantasies that we might have. And I think that when we think about kink, often in the mainstream media, it's painted as something that's like dungeons and darkness and leather and whips. And it totally can be that, but it's not necessarily always got that involved. So for example, like my sexual fantasies are much more like mental, like I'm thinking about things or I'm creating images, whereas what I really enjoy physically is like having a beating. And for me, that doesn't turn me on, but it really helps me to access my body and access my ra and feeling empowered through receiving that physical sensation. And this is something that you can really practice with friends and like people that you don't feel sexually towards. And I think that that's just a really nice thing to bring in. So when we think about how Conscious Kink can help us explore our fantasies, as I sort of touched on earlier, is like, for me, it gives us the context within which we can explore anything we want. So the pillars of Conscious Kink sort of being the safety aspect. So communication, Ali mentioned the traffic light system, like green being, yes, I'm enjoying this. I'm liking what's going on. This can be helpful, like when you're moving to different areas of the body. So like you know, let's say you're hitting someone here and you're about to hit them here, you can sort of ask green as a question, like, would that be okay? Amber or orange, as Ali said, is to pause and just maybe you need a glass of water, or maybe it's too hard. It's a space to just make some slight adjustments. And the reason why I love orange so much is because it allows us to communicate while staying in the erotic flow. So it doesn't, I think there's a huge misconception that communicating in sex or fantasies or exploration of this sort ruins the situation. Whereas when you start to practice it and you understand how it can be involved in it rather than a separate thing, it really becomes like such a fun and so much more safer way to explore your fantasies. So yeah, I really love the communication aspect. And again, just to like sort of note, it comes back to this thing of sometimes it's awkward and sometimes it's fumbly and sometimes it does, you know, get in the way of the flow, and that's okay. You know, I think often it's like when we're doing something sexy, it's like, right, I'm being sexy and cool and dominatrixy now, so I've got to get it all right and I can never break this flow that I'm in. And it's like, that's a lot of pressure, you know. It's like seeing it as a place to play instead, I think is really helpful. Yeah, so conscious kink, as I was saying, I think it just provides the framework within which to play. So there's this communication, there's consent going on throughout. Oh, sorry, just to go back to the traffic light system. Red, the final one, being that the scene ends. This often is when someone is overwhelmed or something's happened, maybe a trigger's come in, and red means stop. And you don't just want to pull away immediately from someone. It's just like taking a breath, gently stopping, holding them or touching them or whatever, and just stepping away very, very gently and just asking, what do you need? You know, so it's not this immediate breakaway. They might feel dropped. It's like, I'm still here with you. And what might you need to come down from this experience? Do you need space? Do you need a cuddle? Do you need some chocolate? Do you need me to just leave you for a minute? Yeah. So quickly, I know that I'm saying a lot, but I love this. Again, what I really love about conscious kink as a practice and like coming to see a professional practitioner like myself is that, as was touched on before, is there's this really clean dynamic. It's like, yeah, we can go in and eroticism and sexuality is welcome, but it's very clear what our roles are. Like, I'm the practitioner and you're the client. So there isn't this potential for us to create a relationship. We're not building on something here that potentially has a lot of emotional dynamics involved of, like, let's say when you're dating someone, is that sense of your attachment styles might come in, or, you know, whatever, you really want to like this person, so you might start people pleasing, and that might come in still to the dynamic, but in this space with a professional, it's welcomed as part of the process. We talk about it, we talk about what's coming up, we learn how to discuss what conscious kink might bring up for us and use it as part of the healing. So yeah, love conscious kink and would recommend it, you know, for anyone who's wanting to explore their fantasies.
Totally agree with all of that, Ria. It's a wonderful fit. Both conscious kink and fantasies are exploring the meaning of story. But one of the pitfalls of fantasy is that it's in our head and pleasure happens in the body. So what, you know, you can go down rabbit holes exploring fantasy. What conscious exploration on conscious kink does is it includes the embodiment, it includes really being present. You know, presence is probably the most fundamental thing for really good sex and pleasure. So yeah, putting those all together is essential.
I would say, what's the point of conscious kink is to understand power, where it's time to take it, where it's time to help someone else find it. I remember one of my teachers saying, "You're not submissive at all, Alison. You need to top from the bottom." And just kind of that, okay, that's the way through, because other than that, I might have been over allowing or people thinking I was more submissive. And for me, who's fairly mild mannered and would avoid conflict at all times, I've also used conscious kink to work through the betrayal wound of my childhood, and also express anger at the people in the past and the people who were present. Like none of them, you know, these were just people I was working with, but just to heal old wounds and to give them expression as part of, I mean, you know, this stuff takes a long time to unpick ourselves and what unconsciously is running us. But when we can make the unconscious conscious, and in the care and willingness of other people who are not going to judge us. And, you know, I found my mean streak through conscious kink, you know, but mostly I'm all right, but you cross me and I'm going to kill you, you know. And so admitting that to myself, that I'm not like Mrs. Nice, was very powerful, because now I can stand in a more balanced knowledge of myself about where I am great, but also where I'm a pain in the ass, you know, and where I'm not good to be with. And, you know, I'm almost the opposite of you wanting to be helpful. I just want to be in charge, you know. And so just acknowledging that, and then being able to work with, okay, then, you know, I'm a big lover of the Enneagram as well, and sort of seeing that quality for leadership rather than control. It's been hugely helpful in understanding where of making choices that suit my personality, and letting people know where I can't help as well.
Right, thank you. I have to agree with everything that's been said, and there's nothing more satisfying than having a day retreat with a client and looking at the different ways that they can explore their fantasies, and looking at the tools and the tips and the dynamics that can unfold, so that essentially that person can then go out into the world a little bit more informed about what they want and how to ask for it. It can be really beautiful. It's a little bit like wine tasting, only you're finding what really works for you, what really works, what fuels your eroticism, and it can be really beautiful. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to work with clients in this way. So essentially, in answer to that question, how can conscious kink help us to explore our fantasies? I hear people sharing around communication, consent, safety. The traffic lights are particularly orange, the pause, permission to get it wrong, introducing play, exploring meaning, bringing your presence, bringing it out of your mind and into your body, and understanding power. Is my taboo fantasy healthy, and are there any dangers of exploring it? So it might be useful to define what is taboo first, and what is healthy rabbit ears. Simon, would you like to start us off on this?
Yeah, certainly. So somebody might be concerned that there's something wrong with them for having forbidden, illegal, or fantasies that are considered disturbing generally by our society. And that can be quite upsetting for people. You know, they might have incest, rape, paedophilia, or bestiality fantasies, and a whole load of other fantasies. I think what's really useful is to understand that where fantasies are coming from is a healthy drive, and that there's nothing wrong at all with having these fantasies. It's our attitude towards them that actually is most important. And if we can be accepting of them in ourselves and others, then there's so much healing to come from that. What's dangerous is when we might feel those fantasies and we choose to repress them, and then we end up not acting them out unconsciously. There's a risk there. So if you're worried about what's going on for you, talk to a professional, would be my advice. If you are considering acting things out, then obviously consider legality, ethics? Is this really in consent? And risks for your physical and emotional well-being.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we sort of bring in this sort of aspect of darker fantasies, because I think a lot of people will have maybe some element of a taboo fantasy. Like, I think the most searched category of porn at the moment is incest porn. And I find that really interesting. It's like, what is the dynamics that's alive in there that feels like interesting or exciting to explore? And also the fact that in real life, like, that would be inappropriate to explore that, and illegal, as you were saying. But I think that it's good to bring this in, because I think these darker fantasies often, again, encapsulate something that we could learn about ourselves, like some element of that flavor of relationship, or the dynamic that was involved, or some sort of energy that we want or need that's underneath that.
Yeah, fantasy, they're natural. I wonder whether, instead of saying, are they healthy, just going, are they helpful? Are the fantasies helpful for what you want to create in your life? Because if you're running a trip on, I want to meet the knight in shining armor, or the perfect divine masculine, like, really? How are you blocking the people in front of you and their potential gifts if all you're judging them is against, the one that is perfect? And so we are sort of, we can ignore the gift of the everyday, because we're holding out for this thing that might never come. And so doesn't, whether they're taboo or these everyday, media induced fantasies about the perfect this, that, or the other, like, getting under them, what is it that we're looking for? Acceptance, recognition, witnessing, being met. And those can come from those. Action changes the story, from in getting out of your head and going into places where you're meeting real life, and not constantly looking for this it's like anything. Go into it, and yet don't be compelled by it, because meeting life in the moment is where we're going to have the connection and intimacy. And if we're trying to control somebody to make them like the guy in our head or the person in our head, it's not, we're always going to find everything judging. We're always going to find everything wanting. And there's no satisfaction in life in that.
Thank you. Yeah. I think for me, there's two things here around shame again. So just to define shame versus guilt. Guilt is, I've done something wrong and I can usually make amends in some way. I can apologize, or I can fix it, or do something to ease the error. So guilt is, I've done something wrong. Shame is, I am wrong. And this is deep-rooted self-belief around how, in this case, I am wrong. I'm wrong for having this fantasy. The invitation is, when you work with a professional particularly, they will help you to step through the shame into self-acceptance. And this is hugely important, and a hugely important part of moving into exploring and accepting fantasies and learning to love yourself. It's a very woo-woo idea. And I just wanted to share this kind of quote that came to me as you were speaking, which is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So if you are really concerned about exploring your rape fantasies or exploring your incest stories, if you can work through that consciously and begin to understand where these things come from, that will hold treasure for you on so many levels. And again, speaking from personal experience here, as I'm sure many of us are, what impact might it have on society at large if we understood our fantasies more? Ria.
Ooh, I mean, we've already touched on quite a lot of this, but the way that I really see and understand exploring our fantasies is something that Ali touched on before, which was all about power, right? Power dynamics are happening all around us all of the time. We're always engaging in some sort of power dynamic. Teacher, student, our boss at work, maybe our employees at work, our team. There's always elements of power going on. And I think that if we're able to understand our relationship to power, and for example, like, do we want to have our power taken from us, or do we want to have power over somebody else? The more that we can understand these darker or more shadowy aspects of us and bring them, how I see conscious kink is you're not pretending to try to do something. Like, I'm not pretending to have power over you. I'm accessing the part of me that wants to have power over you, and I'm trying it on, and I'm fleshing it out, and I'm expanding it, my understanding of it, so that when I go back out into the world, I understand a bit more about why I want to have power over other people, or how that looks like for me when I've engaged with it with consent. So that then when we encounter power dynamics in our life, and potentially we lean more towards wanting power over or wanting power under, we know what that is. So we're much more likely to be in a role of an abuser, or to be in a position where we're being abused, you know. So in society at large, if we all understood the ways in which we interact with power a bit more, say for example, if naturally you're very submissive, and then you get the chance to step into the dominant role, it's like, okay, I know how that feels now, so I can maybe in situations access a bit more of that inner dom, or that inner, you know, and to feel like I can stand in that more in life as a whole. So, you know, like, when even like if with our boss at work, if they're telling us what to do, it's like, oh, okay, well, I've been told what to do before, so now I can have a bit more fun with this, rather than feeling like I'm just at the will of whatever you want to say. It's like, oh, am I subbing at work? Don't mind if I do, you know? And then you can have a bit more of a relationship with it. So I think if everybody, especially the people in power, if they understood more like how to engage with power more consciously, I think that we'd have a much more cohesive society, and people who had a much more integrated sense of self.
For me, one of the real gifts of understanding our fantasies is self-acceptance. And the more we accept ourselves, the more we're able to accept other people. So I think like a widespread, deeper understanding of fantasies would be extremely transformational and positive for society as a whole.
I'd like to add to that, knowing ourselves, our light and our shadow, helps us be more authentic, helps us make choices, and helps us make agreements with people, that actually we are willing to let them explore their power, or their femme or homme fatale, but we have agreement. We know what we're doing. We've got clarity, and we know how long we're doing it for, and then we can step out of it. Finding my bratty sub, it's like, you want it, daddy-o? Put me over your knee, and that kind of thing. Then I didn't used to be a playful, like accessing this playfulness, which, it's helped me sort of lose my seriousness about it and have more fun, and help me lose my disapproval of it, and be more accepting, not just of myself, but of others, and going, how are we going to, how are we going to spend our time fundamentally? Not, I just hope something nice happens. Like, we can make clearer choices, and get creative. I think creativity here is, because you can make things up and try things of like, I've never tried this. Can we try it? And sometimes it will have a rush of unexpected arousal, and other times it'd be like, I don't know what the fuss was about. And for that, we can broaden our repertoire.
Thank you. I suppose for me, what comes up is that, and is the foundation of all of my work actually, is that when we explore more of ourselves and understand more of ourselves, we can step into acceptance, as already been mentioned, but acceptance compassion for ourselves. And when we are kinder to ourselves and more compassionate to ourselves, that leaks out into our relationships. We become more compassionate with the people around us. And that's like dropping a pebble in the lake. You know, those ripples ripple out. So it's just like when somebody smiles to me when I'm in the supermarket, that kind of lightens my day. And then I might smile at somebody else and lightens their day. And then that will, somebody will go home feeling good, and then they'll be nicer to their partner. And, and it ripples out like that. This is how we're all interconnected. So for me, from the very personal to the universal, the more we can do around self-acceptance, getting our needs met in healthy, compassionate and kind and horny ways, that helps us to be better humans. Just don't we feel better when we've had a gorgeous evening? The next day we're so much happier, and we share that light with people. So kindness, compassion, consent, and for me, that's one body, one heart, one soul at the time. This is the work we are doing. We're changing the world, one body, one heart, one soul at a time. How can I bring up my fantasies with my partner without freaking them out? And how do I deal with it if they do freak out?
The sense here I'm getting is an expectation of having a difficult conversation. My experience of difficult conversations is it makes a massive amount of difference what I'm coming in with, how I am around it. So if I'm coming in needing my partner to be able to hear me and give me validation and all of these things, and I'm afraid that they might not, they're going to be picking up on that and they're not going to feel at ease. If I'm able to explore what's getting in the way of my own self-acceptance, or my needs, and take care of them myself, maybe talk to a professional, work through anything that needs healing, and I can come in calmly and talk to them about it without needing them to offer me anything in return, you're so much more likely to get a positive response.
Like circle the topic and don't unconsciously impose it, because it can add a lot of pressure by hinting or, get clear. Because say I was going to, if you're going to meet somebody new, like don't go in assuming they're gonna be turned on by what you are, but just kind of going, oh, this is stuff I've done before. Are you interested? Before you put the whole wave of fulfillment of your fantasies on this poor unsuspecting person. So understand that there's nothing wrong with any of this, but other people may be a bit yucked by your yum, and then filter, circle it, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think for me in relationships, there are already competing needs. If and I'm making an assumption that this person is in an established relationship, so you will already have competing needs that exist. So how do you already navigate these? And is this any different? Okay, there may be more shame or more taboo around it, but is this any different to how you would ordinarily navigate difference between you and your partner? Again, options to engage a professional, create some relationship agreements. You might want to explore ethical non-monogamy, be in integrity with yourself, and at the same time respect your partner's autonomy and allow them to have their own integrity about what feels right for them. Wheel of consent is really great to explore for partners, particularly if you've been in long-term relationships and there's power dynamics or unspoken or unseen power dynamics going on in the relationship. So that can be a really helpful tool. And, the question of whether the secretive or deceptive or transgressive nature of your fantasies, is that part of the turn on for you, but you need to check in whether that is then leaking into your relationship in other ways, and whether you're actually honouring your partner, your existing relationship, by enacting those secrecies. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm aware that we've run out of time, so we haven't been able to cover all of the questions, unfortunately. It remains for me to say thank you to Sarah for tech and Nemo support, and thank you, Alison Pilling. Thank you, Ria Hope. And thank you, Simon Feely, for joining us today.